Hello. So what I'm going to be talking about today is just how to work with certain children that might have certain disabilities, such as being hearing impaired, behavioral issues, autism, or verbally impaired. These are just some of the things that we went over in this class, over some of our chapters, and how to work with certain kids, especially when it comes to presenting the universal design of learning. Um, and me personally, as an actual special ed teacher as it is now, I deal with a lot of this stuff personally, and I deal with it on a daily basis for some of the kids I work with. Um, and so I've just a little bit of experience in just kind of all these fields when it comes to making sure that I come up with the right plans for these children so that way they can stay successful in class, in school, in my classroom, and just in life in general. I try the best I can to make sure these kids get everything they need and learn how to be successful. So one of the first ones we're going to talk about is the hearing impaired. When it comes to children that are hearing impaired, obviously we're talking about kids that might be deaf, partially deaf, or just have issues when it comes to hearing. So a lot of times kids might even have to wear a hearing aid while they're in classes and such like that. One of the kids I actually do work with is hearing impaired. He has a hearing device that he wears in his ear. Um, I check on it every morning to make sure that it works. So that way, when he's in the class, he can be 100% successful because one, he can hear everything that's going on in the classroom, and he can make sure that he's listening to his normal ed teacher. When it comes to working with kids that have hearing impairments, especially when it comes to the universal design for learning, one of the first things is how, as a teacher, when it comes to how we represent the information that we're going to be given to the student. When it comes to hearing impaired, I feel that sign language would definitely be something that would be great to work with, especially if you have partially deaf or even more deaf. And the hearing impairment is actual to the point where it's an actual disability. And so sign language can be something that can be very helpful. Um, for the teacher and for the students to learn. And this is just a great way to represent everything that, as a teacher that you're presenting to the student. Another thing is just really making sure that everything you do has a visual representation. Obviously, with hearing impaired, eyes are going to have to be the way they learn. And so when it comes to representation of information, visuals is another very important thing that I suggest. When it comes to the means of expression for the child, I would expect everything to be written down. I expect the child to answer all questions or as much as they possibly can. Um, Using writing. Like I said, it depends on what level of impairment when it comes to how much they can and cannot hear. Obviously, if everything's just fine, they're gonna work as best they possibly can with the classroom, just like the other kids. But like I said, when we come to the more severe hearing impaired, I mean, if it gets to the point to where everything they answer needs to be written down, that is, perfectly fine. That's just the way it's going to have to be. That's the way they can express themselves to make sure they're getting their points across and make sure they're getting their answers across. And then one of the last things to worry about is the engagement. Once again, this kind of comes back to how the teacher represents the information given. Same way when it comes to engaging with the child. I feel like visuals is going to be very important, making sure that there's a picture for everything that is being taught. All the assignments and everything just has visual representation, so that way the kid can read and know exactly what they need to be working on, so that way they can remain successful. Okay. One of the other disabilities we're going to talk about is behavioral issues. This is something I actually have lots of experience in. I work with many kids that have behavioral issues, and when it comes down to it, a lot of the times kids with behavioral issues, it's a lot of things that they cannot help. So some kids, might be very high energied, and that's just, something in their body that just makes them want to get up and move. Constant fidgeting, and like I said, these are things they cannot help. These are things that go on in their brain and makes them act a certain way that someone that does not have a behavioral issue might see. One of the more severe cases of behavior actually comes into kids just not wanting to do anything and constantly acting out. So there are cases like that. Sometimes what a child can't help will affect them in different kind of ways. So like I said, there's some that can manage, and then there are some that are very severe and just constantly act out. So when it comes to how the teacher represents, I feel like simple and clear instructions. I mean, making sure that what you're going to teach these kids is as simple as can be, something that can't get frustrated over, because frustration and anger is one of the first emotions somebody with behavior issues will go to. They are used to being angry a lot. And so if you're giving information or you're teaching a lesson and you're making it as hard as can be and it's very confusing for the student, then expect anger issues. Expect acting out. So I try to keep it as simple as possible when it comes to how they might express themselves. Like I said, when it comes to behavioral kids, a lot of times their minds, their brains are making their bodies do things they can't even understand or can't help sometimes. I can obviously see in a full classroom, and it's a little bit harder. So I suggest, obviously making sure that that student is placed somewhere, I say outside, not outside, but like on the outsides of the desk or in the back, so that way, if they need to get up, if they need to fidget, if they need to do something physical, they have the room to do that. They have the room and they have the space. Also, they won't, be a distraction to the classroom. Obviously, in a special ed classroom, I have the opportunity to have the kids one-on-one. So when it comes to a child working with me, I have a whole room for them to be able to express themselves. I know, when we work on stuff, they get frustrated, they get tired. Sometimes they need to get up, they need to burn off energy, and I get that. And then when it comes to means of engagement, once again, keep everything simple. Like I said, the best way to keep someone with behavioral issues calm is just making sure that they don't get frustrated, they don't get confused, they don't have a reason to act out, they don't have a reason not to want to learn or want to listen. As long as you keep everything nice and simple, learning becomes easier to them, and that is the point, is to try to make it easy as possible for them to learn, so that way they do not get bored, they do not want to act out, and they do not want to listen to hard instructions. So just keep it very, very simple. One of the other ones is kids with autism. Something else I have had experience with. Once again, certain things that they might do, they cannot help. They're just born a certain type of way. Their brains work a different kind of way. So when it comes to kids with autism, obviously, they're going to learn at a different pace from a normal child. So when it comes to representation from the teacher, once again, I believe simple, and slow down instruction. And when I mean by slow down instruction, I don't mean as in like talking slow or anything. I just mean as in taking something and breaking it down to very, very basics. Depending on how much that student might understand what you're talking about, I say break it down as much as you possibly can, whether it's math, reading, writing, any kind of, subject. Take the lesson, make it as simple and easy broken down as possible. And that's what I mean by slow down, as in piece by piece. How they might, express themselves, it comes to, they're going to give you the best they possibly can. So as a teacher, as someone working with them, you have to expect that you're not always going to get the right answer. You're not always going to get something you think you might need from the student. The student is going to try their possible best to give you what they believe is correct. So patience is definitely going to be a big thing. And like I said, just expect the student to give you the best they possibly can and to be able to work with that. When it comes to engagement, once again, I just come back to the simpleness. Make sure every lesson, everything you do is simple, simple, simple. Next is visually impaired. When it comes to visually impaired, I have no experience with this, but just from some of the research I've done, I believe vocal instructions is going to be your number one. for teachers to represent themselves. Everything is going to be vocally. So when it comes to that, just making sure that there's clear instructions, and when you're speaking, making sure that your instructions are loud and clear, so that way the child has no room for error, because they're going to hear everything you're saying. When it comes to how they might represent or express themselves, obviously they're going to be very audio, so a lot of vocal, answers and stuff like that is what's going to come from them. Possibly to a scribe, someone to write down, what the kid might need to say. That might come from tests, that might come from assignments, stuff like that. And then when it comes to engagement, once again, vocal, everything vocal, and possible learning of Braille. Braille is also something kids with visual impairments have to work with, and have, as a resource, so Braille would not be a bad thing to keep around. Well, yeah, when it comes to working with kids with certain disabilities, I mean, you just have to make sure that number one for everything is just patience. Once again, these kids were born a certain type of way. They didn't ask to, so a lot of their brains, a lot of their physical capabilities are a lot different, And so the best thing you do is just be patient, work the best you can, and just define how you need to work with each one of these children.